The question hung in the air like a challenge. Vextar's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation among his species. Around them, the cantina patrons held their collective breath, sensing they were witnessing something significant. "My scars are proof of Zelrathi's strength," Vextar finally said, but his voice lacked the earlier confidence. "They show that I can endure anything." "Do they?" Marcus asked, rolling his sleeves back down with deliberate slowness. "Or do they just show that you have thick skin?" A Centauri trader near the bar let out a nervous laugh, quickly stifled when Vextar's head snapped toward the sound. The warrior's reputation preceded him wherever he went. 3 years ago, he had single-handedly cleared a pirate nest in the asteroid fields of Proxima. Last year, he had been part of the team that took down the rogue AI controlling the mining platforms on Titan's Edge. His armor bore the marks of both encounters, along with dozens of others. But as Marcus stood there, seemingly relaxed, despite facing down one of the Rim's most feared fighters, something about the dynamic in the room had shifted. "You speak boldly. For someone with no protection," Vextar said, but he didn't advance. Something in the human's calm demeanor was giving him pause. "Protection is overrated," Marcus replied. "Besides, I'm not the one who brought up scars as proof of worth." He gestured to a nearby table where a group of vegan merchants had been enjoying their meal before the confrontation began. "See them? Their species never developed violence. No wars, no predators on their homeworld worth mentioning. They've been spacefaring for 3,000 years and have maybe a dozen armed conflicts in their entire history." The vegans in question looked uncomfortable being suddenly thrust into the conversation, their large, dark eyes darting between the human and the Zelrathi. "And yet," Marcus continued, "they've colonized more systems than any other species in known space, built the largest trade networks, created the most stable governments. Tell me, Vextar, how many systems has Zelrathi conquered?" "Conquest is not the same as colonization," Vextar growled. "Anyone can hide behind walls and treaties." "True," Marcus agreed. "But can anyone hold the vegan crucible?" The effect of those words was immediate and dramatic. Every being in the cantina who knew their recent history suddenly looked at Marcus with new eyes. The vegan crucible had been a 3-week siege that pitted a small human defensive force against overwhelming odds. The attackers had been a coalition of pirate fleets, mercenary companies, and opportunistic raiders all trying to break the vegan trade monopoly in the outer systems. The humans had volunteered to hold the main defensive platform while the vegans evacuated their civilian population. What was supposed to be a 12-hour holding action had turned into a nightmare of urban warfare, ship-to-ship combat, and desperate last stands. "You were there?" asked a quiet voice from near the bar. An ethereal had spoken, their translucent form shimmering with what their species used to express intense curiosity. Ethereals were known for their long memories and comprehensive databases of galactic history. Marcus nodded. 47th Shock Division, 3rd Company. We drew the short straw. But the crucible was. The ethereal's voice trailed off as they accessed their racial memory banks. "According to our records, the human defensive force was outnumbered 50-1. They faced 6 different species of attackers, including Krillian death squads and Thanathan berserkers. 53-1, actually," Marcus corrected. "But who's counting?" Vextar's armor plates shifted as he processed this information. The crucible was studied in military academies across the galaxy as an example of defensive perfection. The fact that humans had held it was impressive. The fact that they had done it without powered armor or natural weapons was considered impossible by most military theorists. "Even if you were there," Vextar said, though his tone had become more respectful, "the crucible was a defensive action. Zelrathi excel at offensive warfare." "Fair enough," Marcus said. "How about the breaking of New Mars?" This time the silence in the cantina was absolute. The breaking of New Mars wasn't just military history, it was legend. A single human battalion had penetrated the most heavily fortified planet in the Outer Rim, dismantled its planetary defense grid from the inside, and opened the way for a full-scale liberation of the system. The planet had been under the control of the hegemony, a coalition of the galaxy's most ruthless species. They had turned New Mars into a fortress world, with enough firepower to destroy entire fleets and shield generators that could protect it from orbital bombardment. The conventional wisdom was that it would take years to reduce the planet's defenses through siege warfare. Instead, the humans had volunteered for what everyone assumed was a suicide mission. They had used modified cargo ships to break through the planetary shields, then fought their way through defense networks that had been designed to stop armored divisions. The fact that they had succeeded was considered one of the greatest military achievements in recent galactic history. "You're claiming you were part of that as well?" Vexitar asked, but his aggressive posture had completely disappeared. He was now facing Marcus directly, warrior to warrior. Marcus pulled out a small device from his pocket, a personal identification scanner common throughout human space. He placed his hand on it, and a hologram appeared showing his military record. The list of campaigns, battles, and decorations scrolled past in a steady stream. Battle of New Mars, defense of the Vegan Crucible, the Thanathan campaign, the siege of Rigel Station. The list went on for what seemed like minutes, each entry representing months or years of warfare across dozens of systems. 47 years of service, Marcus said quietly. Joined when I was 18, retired last month at 65. Figured it was time to try civilian life. The ethereal at the bar made a sound that their species used to express profound respect. Your service record shows participation in every major human military action for the past 4 decades, including several campaigns we weren't aware humans had participated in. Marcus shrugged. Classified operations don't usually make the news. Vexitar stared at the hologram, his 4 eyes tracking the scrolling text. When it finally ended, he looked back at Marcus with something approaching awe. "How?" he asked simply. "How what? How does a species with no natural armor, no built-in weapons, no evolutionary advantages for warfare manage to produce soldiers like this?" Vexitar gestured at the still-glowing hologram. "My people are born for battle. Every Zelrathi child learns to fight before they learn to speak. We have advantages your species could never match." Marcus smiled, but there was no mockery in it. "That's exactly the point. You're born fighters. We choose to become warriors." He gestured around the cantina. "Every species here has something that makes them special. Ethereals have perfect memory and advanced technology. Vegans have longevity and patience. Centauri have natural resistance to radiation and toxins. Zelrathi have armor and strength. And humans? Humans have stubbornness," Marcus said simply. "We refuse to quit. We refuse to accept that something can't be done. We refuse to believe that being outmatched means being beaten." He rolled up his sleeve again, showing the roadmap of scars. "Every mark on my body is from a fight I wasn't supposed to win. Every battle in that record was against enemies who had every advantage except one. Which was? They weren't fighting for something they believed was worth dying for." The cantina remained silent as the implications of that statement sank in. Every species present had their own military traditions, their own concepts of honor and courage. But the idea that an entire species could be motivated by something beyond individual survival was foreign to most of them. "So when you mock our soft skin," Marcus continued, "remember that we keep it soft by choice, because every scar we earn willingly. Every battle we fight, we choose to fight." He looked directly at Vexitar. "The question isn't whether we're tough enough to survive a fight. The question is whether we believe the fight is worth having." Vexitar studied Marcus for a long moment, his 4 eyes scanning the human from head to toe as if seeing him for the first time. The chitinous plates along his arms had stopped their agitated shifting, replaced by the stillness that Zelrathi displayed when they were thinking deeply. "You speak of choice," Vexitar said finally, "but choice implies options. What options does soft flesh have against natural armor?" Instead of answering immediately, Marcus walked over to an empty table and picked up a standard dining knife, the kind used throughout the galaxy for cutting food. The metal was cheap, barely sharp enough for its intended purpose. He held it up so everyone could see it. "This is what most species would call a tool," he said. "Zelrathi would probably call it a toy." Vexitar nodded dismissively. "It could barely penetrate my hide, much less my armor plates." "You're probably right," Marcus agreed. But that's thinking like a Zelrathi. Without warning, Marcus flipped the knife in his hand and drove the point directly into the wooden table. The blade sank deep into the surface with a solid thunk that echoed through the cantina. But instead of leaving it there, he began to work the handle back and forth, widening the hole, creating stress fractures in the wood around the entry point. Zelrathi think in terms of direct confrontation, Marcus explained as he continued his demonstration. Armor against weapons, strength against strength. It's how your species survived on your homeworld. The wood began to crack and splinter around the knife. What had started as a small puncture was becoming a growing web of damage. But humans learned something different. We learned that everything has a weakness. Everything can be broken if you understand how it's put together. With a sharp twist, Marcus snapped off a large chunk of the table's surface. The expensive hardwood, imported from the forests of Alpha Centauri, crumbled like paper once the structural integrity had been compromised. Your armor plates, Marcus said, pulling the knife free and examining its bent tip. They overlap, don't they? For flexibility? Vextar's eyes narrowed. This wasn't common knowledge among most species. The exact construction of Zelrathi natural armor was considered military intelligence. And where they overlap, Marcus continued, there are gaps, tiny ones, but gaps nonetheless, large enough for something small and sharp to slip through. He demonstrated by sliding the damaged knife between his fingers, showing how even a broken blade could find its way through the smallest opening. A Zelrathi warrior thinks about defeating armor. A human thinks about bypassing it entirely. The ethereal at the bar made another of their respectful sounds. This explains many of the tactical reports we've studied. Human forces consistently engaged superior enemies using unconventional strategies. Like what? Asked one of the Centauri traders, genuinely curious. Marcus considered the question. The Battle of Kepler's Gate, for instance. We were facing a Krillian battle fleet, 12 ships to our 3, each one individually more powerful than anything we had. The cantina patrons leaned in slightly. The Battle of Kepler's Gate was another legendary engagement, though the details were less widely known than some of the others Marcus had mentioned. Krillian ships are basically flying fortresses, Marcus continued. Massive armor, incredible firepower designed to slug it out in direct combat. They were expecting us to either run or try to match them shot for shot. What did you do instead? Vextar asked, his professional interest clearly engaged. We surrendered, Marcus said simply. The effect was immediate. Several beings made sounds of surprise or confusion. Surrender was not a concept associated with human military doctrine. You surrendered? Vextar's voice carried a note of disappointment. We broadcast a surrender message and shut down our weapons, Marcus confirmed. Standard diplomatic protocols. The Krillians were honor-bound to accept our surrender and take us prisoner rather than destroy us. That seems pragmatic, one of the vegan merchants said carefully. Though not particularly heroic, Marcus smiled. The heroic part came next. See, Krillian ships are designed for external threats. All their armor faces outward. Their internal security is minimal because they never expected enemies to be inside their ships. Understanding began to dawn on several faces around the cantina. Our surrender signal was broadcast on a frequency that interfered with Krillian navigation systems, Marcus explained. While they were trying to figure out why their instruments were acting up, we launched boarding pods disguised as escape shuttles. You attacked them from inside, Vextar said, and there was genuine respect in his voice. 12 ships. Marcus nodded. We took control of their engineering sections, turned their own weapons on each other, and captured the entire fleet without firing a single shot from our own ships. The cantina erupted in surprised murmurs. This wasn't how space battles were supposed to work. Most species fought by the established rules of engagement, using recognized tactics that had been proven over centuries of warfare. But how did you know their internal defenses were weak? Asked the ethereal. Because we studied them, Marcus said. For months before the battle, human intelligence had been analyzing Krillian ship construction, their military philosophy, their cultural blind spots. We didn't try to match their strengths. We found their weaknesses. He gestured around the cantina. Every species here has evolved different advantages, but every species also has gaps in their thinking because of those same advantages. What do you mean? Vextar asked. Marcus pointed to the ethereals. Your people have perfect memory and advanced mental capabilities, but that makes you overthink problems that require intuitive solutions. The ethereal's form shimmered, indicating surprised agreement. Vegans, Marcus continued, indicating the merchants, have incredible patience and long-term thinking, but sometimes you need to act immediately, without a perfect plan. He turned to Vextar. And Zelrathi have natural armor and strength that makes you incredibly effective in direct confrontation. But it also makes you think every problem is a nail that needs to be hit with a hammer. And humans? Vextar asked. What are your weaknesses? Marcus laughed, the first genuine humor he'd shown since the conversation began. We're weak. Physically, mentally, technologically. Compared to most galactic species, humans are inferior in almost every measurable way. Then how? Because we know we're weak, Marcus interrupted. We've never had the luxury of thinking we're the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. We've had to survive by being adaptable, by finding solutions that don't depend on being superior. He rolled up his sleeve again, pointing to one of the more prominent scars. This one is from my first real battle. I was 19, thought I knew everything about warfare. Faced a Thanathan berserker in single combat. Thanathan berserkers were legendary throughout the galaxy, 9 feet tall with forearms and reflexes that made them nearly impossible to hit. They were considered by many to be the ultimate individual fighters. I tried to fight him like a human, Marcus continued. Speed, technique, superior tactics. He tore me apart, literally, I barely survived. How did you eventually defeat him? I didn't, Marcus said simply. I distracted him long enough for my squad to bring down the building we were fighting in. Buried us both under about 10 tons of rubble. The cantina was silent again as beings processed this information. See, that's the difference, Marcus explained. A Zelrathi would try to match a Thanathan berserker strength for strength. A human would drop a building on him. That seems... Vextar paused, searching for the right word. Underhanded? Marcus suggested. Dishonorable? Cowardly? I was going to say effective, Vextar replied. Marcus nodded. Effectiveness is the only honor that matters when people are depending on you to keep them alive. He looked around the cantina one more time. So yes, we have soft skin. We don't have natural armor or weapons or enhanced senses, but we also don't have the limitations that come with those advantages. We can be anything the situation requires us to be, because we don't have any other choice. The cantina on Kepler Station buzzed with the usual mix of species that made the outer rim their home. Smoke from various alien substances created a haze that would have been toxic to most civilized worlds. But here it was just Tuesday. Marcus Chen sat alone at a corner table, nursing his third synthetic whiskey and trying to ignore the conversation happening 3 tables over. The Zelrathi warrior was holding court, as usual. Standing nearly 8 feet tall with chitinous armor plating that covered his entire body, Vextar commanded attention wherever he went. His kind had evolved on a death world where everything tried to kill everything else, and it showed. Each piece of his natural armor bore the scars of countless battles, creating patterns that told stories of survival and conquest. You see this mark here? Vextar's voice carried easily across the cantina as he gestured to a deep groove in his shoulder plate. Krieg Beast on Thanatos 7 tried to take my head clean off, but Zelrathi armor does not break so easily. The crowd around him murmured appreciatively. A few Centauri traders, some vegan merchants, even a pair of the usually aloof ethereals seemed impressed by the display. Marcus took another sip and tried to focus on the data pad in front of him, but the warrior's voice was impossible to ignore. And this one, Vextar continued, pointing to a spiderweb of cracks across his chest piece. Plasma cannon during the siege of Rigel. Burned for 3 days, but Zelrathi endure. We are born for war, shaped by conflict. Marcus had heard this speech before. Every time Vextar came to the station, which was unfortunately often, he would find an audience and regale them with tales of Zelrathi superiority. How their natural armor made them the perfect warriors. How soft-skinned species were weak, dependent on technology and artificial protection. The galaxy is full of weak species, Vextar said, his voice taking on a mocking tone. Beings who hide behind metal and energy shields because their flesh cannot endure even the slightest pain. They know nothing of true strength. Marcus felt several eyes turned toward him. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. They were often dismissed as another soft-skinned species, unsuited for the harsh realities of space. Marcus had heard the whispers in ports across the rim. Humans were traders, diplomats, maybe scientists at best, not warriors. Take humans, for example, Vextar said, and Marcus felt his jaw clench. Such soft pink skin. No natural weapons, no armor, no real defenses at all. I wonder how such a fragile species even survived long enough to reach the stars. Laughter rippled through the cantina. Marcus set down his glass carefully, his knuckles white against the synthetic material. He had been hoping to finish his drink in peace, complete his cargo manifest, and leave for the next system. But some conversations couldn't be ignored. Vextar wasn't done. I heard one of them claim to be a mercenary the other day. Can you imagine? That soft flesh against real weapons? They would break like glass at the first sign of actual combat. More laughter. Marcus stood up slowly, the chair scraping against the metal floor with a sound that cut through the ambient noise. The cantina began to quiet as beings sensed the tension building. Something amusing, human? Vextar turned to face him, his 4 eyes glittering with what might have been anticipation. Did I say something to upset your delicate sensibilities? Marcus walked across the cantina, his boots echoing in the sudden silence. He was average height for his species, maybe 6 feet tall, and looked almost comically small next to the towering Zelrathi. His clothes were simple shipwear, nothing fancy, nothing that screamed warrior or soldier. To the assembled crowd, he probably looked like exactly what Vextar had described. Soft, weak, fragile. Just wondering, Marcus said, his voice calm and steady, if you've ever actually fought anything that could fight back. The cantina went dead silent. Vextar's 4 eyes narrowed, and the chitinous plates along his arms shifted as his muscles tensed beneath them. What did you say, soft skin? I said, Marcus replied, not backing down despite being outweighed by probably 300 pounds, that picking on traders and merchants doesn't make you a warrior. It makes you a bully. Vexatar laughed, but there was no humor in it. You dare challenge me? You who have no armor, no natural weapons, no protection save the clothes on your back? Armor is useful, Marcus agreed. Natural weapons have their place. But they're not what makes a warrior. Then what does, human? Vextar stepped closer, using his height advantage to loom over Marcus. What could your soft species possibly know about warfare? Marcus looked up at the towering alien, seemingly unimpressed by the display of intimidation. Around them, other patrons began to back away, sensing that this confrontation was about to escalate beyond mere words. You want to know about human warfare? Marcus asked quietly. You really want to understand what makes us think we can stand alongside species like yours in the galaxy? Enlighten me, Vexatar said mockingly. Tell me how your fragile flesh compares to Zelrathi armor. Marcus reached up and began to roll up his right sleeve. The simple gesture seemed almost comical given the tension in the room, but something about his calm demeanor made everyone watch intently. The thing about humans, Marcus said as he worked the fabric up his arm, is that we don't need natural armor, we make our own. The sleeve came up past his elbow, revealing skin that definitely wasn't the smooth, unblemished surface that Vexatar had been mocking. The cantina fell into absolute silence as being stared at what was revealed. Marcus's arm was a roadmap of violence. Scars crisscrossed the flesh in patterns that spoke of countless conflicts. Some were thin lines from bladed weapons. Others were puckered circles from energy weapons. A few looked like they had been burned deep into the muscle and healed badly. But what drew the most attention were the tattoos that wove between the scars. Military unit insignias and battle honors that those familiar with human military traditions would recognize. The 47th Terran Shock Division, someone whispered from the crowd. That's impossible. Marcus smiled for the first time since the conversation began. Is it? Vextar's confident posture wavered slightly as he stared at the marked flesh. The 47th Terran Shock Division was legend among the mercenary companies that worked the Outer Rim. They had been the human unit that broke the Centauri blockade at New Kyoto, the ones who held the line at the Vegan Crucible when 3 systems hung in the balance. You see, Marcus continued, beginning to roll up his left sleeve as well. Humans don't grow armor. We earn our scars. Each one tells a story. Each one is a lesson learned the hard way. The left arm revealed even more damage. Burns, cuts, what looked like claw marks from some alien predator, and more tattoos marking campaigns across a dozen systems. So when you mock our soft skin, Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly in the silent cantina, remember this. We chose to keep it soft, because every mark it bears is proof that we survived something that tried to kill us. He looked directly into Vextar's 4 eyes. How many of your scars were your choice? 3 days later, Marcus found himself aboard the GCS Unity, a massive multi-species command ship that served as the mobile headquarters for the hastily assembled task force. The ship itself was a marvel of engineering cooperation, with sections designed by different species to accommodate their specific needs. Andromedan precision, vegan efficiency, human adaptability, and ethereal advanced technology all combined into something that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. The briefing room was packed with representatives from dozens of species, all wearing the various uniforms and insignia of their respective military organizations. Marcus had been given the temporary rank of strategic advisor, which essentially meant he could offer suggestions, but had no official authority. He suspected this was intentional, a way for the Joint Command to use his expertise while maintaining their own chain of command. Admiral Kethmore stood at the head of the room, his tall Andromedan frame radiating the kind of confidence that came from centuries of military tradition. The holographic display behind him showed the target, Hegemony Station Omega, a fortress that defied every conventional military doctrine. Preliminary reconnaissance confirms our worst fears, the Admiral announced. The station is protected by overlapping shield grids that can deflect any known weapon system. Its position in the Void Nebula makes long-range bombardment impossible, and the spatial distortion fields prevent conventional approach vectors. Marcus studied the data scrolling past on his personal display. The station was roughly the size of a small moon, with enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. But what caught his attention wasn't the obvious defenses, it was what wasn't shown. How many ships has the Hegemony stationed there? He asked. Intelligence estimates between 50 and 100 capital ships, replied Commander Yathara, a Vegan officer in charge of fleet reconnaissance. The exact number is difficult to determine due to the spatial distortions. And how many support vessels? Unknown, Commander Yathara admitted. The station appears to be self-sufficient for most operations. Marcus frowned, something about this bothering him. In all his years fighting the Hegemony, they had never built anything that wasn't designed for expansion and conquest. A purely defensive installation wasn't their style. What's the station's purpose? He asked. I mean, specifically, what is it designed to do besides defend itself? Admiral Kethmore consulted his notes. According to captured intelligence, it's a command and control center for the entire Hegemony fleet structure. From there, they can coordinate operations across multiple sectors simultaneously. That's what the intelligence says, Marcus replied. But what do your instincts tell you? The question caused some confusion among the assembled officers. Military intelligence was based on facts and analysis, not instincts. Explain, Admiral Kethmore said curtly. Marcus stood and walked to the holographic display, gesturing to the massive structure rotating slowly in the projection field. Look at the construction. Multiple redundant systems, isolated sections, massive power generation capabilities. This isn't just a command center. He manipulated the display, highlighting certain sections of the station. These areas here, they're not command decks or communication arrays. They're manufacturing facilities. Manufacturing what? Asked Captain Vextar, who had somehow managed to get himself assigned to the task force. His presence wasn't entirely surprising, given that several Zelrathi clans had sworn vengeance against the Hegemony. Ships, Marcus replied. This station isn't just coordinating the Hegemony fleet. It's building new ones. The implications of this statement sent a chill through the briefing room. If the station was capable of manufacturing capital ships, then the threat was far greater than anyone had realized. That's impossible, protested Commander Yathara. The resource requirements alone would be astronomical. Not if you're strip mining entire star systems, Marcus countered. The Void Hunters don't just consume resources for fun. They're feeding the manufacturing capabilities of this station. Admiral Kethmore studied the display with new eyes. If you're correct, then a conventional assault would be doomed to failure. Even if we could break through the defenses, they could simply replace any losses faster than we could inflict them. Exactly, Marcus agreed. Which is why we're not going to attack it. Then what do you suggest? The Admiral asked. Marcus smiled, the expression that his former comrades had learned to associate with particularly dangerous plans. We're going to steal it. The briefing room erupted in voices expressing surprise, confusion, and outright disbelief. The idea of stealing a moon-sized fortress seemed beyond impossible. "Hear me out," Marcus continued, raising his voice over the commotion. "The hegemony has put all their resources into making this station impregnable from the outside. But what about from the inside?" He manipulated the display again, showing the internal structure of the station. "Look at these manufacturing sections. They're designed to build ships, which means they need regular shipments of raw materials, components, and specialized equipment. You're suggesting we infiltrate the station disguised as a supply convoy?" Captain Vextar asked. "Not exactly," Marcus replied. "I'm suggesting we become a supply convoy." Admiral Kethmore's harmonics took on a skeptical tone. "Explain." Marcus called up a new section of the display showing fleet movements in the surrounding sectors. "According to our intelligence, the hegemony has been raiding independent mining operations throughout the region. They're taking the equipment, the ships, and the crews. Enslaving them," Commander Ythara said grimly. "Right. So we give them exactly what they expect. A mining convoy with valuable equipment, running scared from hegemony raiders." The room was quiet as the assembled officers processed this idea. "You want to fake a mining convoy?" Admiral Kethmore said slowly. "Approach the station pretending to be refugees, and then somehow take control of a fortress protected by defenses that have defeated our best fleets." "That's the general idea," Marcus confirmed. "It's insane," protested Commander Ythara. "It's also exactly the kind of plan the hegemony won't expect," Vextar pointed out. "They think in terms of direct confrontation. This bypasses their entire defensive philosophy." Marcus nodded approvingly. "The warrior understands. Sometimes the best way through a wall is to convince someone to open the door for you." "Even if we could get inside," Admiral Kethmore said, "how would a small infiltration team take control of a station with thousands of hegemony personnel?" "We don't take control of the personnel," Marcus replied. "We take control of the station itself." He highlighted the central core of the station, a massive structure that seemed to connect all the other sections. Every manufacturing facility, every defensive system, every life support grid runs through this central core. Control that, and you control everything else. The central core would be the most heavily defended section of the entire station, Commander Ythara pointed out. "Defended against external attack," Marcus agreed. "But what about internal systems failure?" He called up schematics showing the power distribution network throughout the station. "The hegemony builds things to last, but they also build them to be efficient. Everything is interconnected, everything depends on everything else." "You're talking about sabotage," Admiral Kethmore realized. "I'm talking about precision system failures that cascade throughout the entire station," Marcus corrected. "Make it look like accidents, equipment malfunctions, things that require immediate attention from technical personnel." "And while they're dealing with the accidents?" Vextar asked. "While they're distracted, a small team reaches the central core and takes control of the primary systems. Once we control the station, we can turn its own defenses against the hegemony fleet." The room was silent as the assembled officers considered the audacity of the plan. It required perfect timing, incredible luck, and the kind of improvisation that most military organizations discouraged. "How many people would you need for this infiltration team?" Admiral Kethmore asked. 12, Marcus replied immediately. "Small enough to avoid detection, large enough to handle multiple objectives simultaneously. And you would lead this team?" Marcus shook his head. "I would be part of the team, but the mission would require specialists from multiple species. Ethereals for technical expertise, Andromedans for precision operations, humans for adaptability. And Zelrathi?" Vextar asked hopefully. "And Zelrathi for situations where subtlety fails and we need to fight our way out," Marcus confirmed. Admiral Kethmore considered the proposal for a long moment. "This plan violates every established military doctrine. It depends on deception, sabotage, and luck, rather than superior firepower or tactical advantage." "Yes," Marcus agreed. "It also represents our best chance of stopping the hegemony before they can launch their offensive," the Admiral admitted. "Also yes." "Very well," Admiral Kethmore decided. "Operation Trojan Horse is approved. You have 48 hours to assemble your team and prepare for infiltration." As the briefing room began to empty, Vextar approached Marcus with something resembling admiration in his 4 eyes. "You realize this plan is completely insane," the Zelrathi warrior said. "I'm counting on it," Marcus replied. "Sanity is overrated when you're trying to save the galaxy." The conversation was interrupted by a sudden commotion near the cantina's entrance. The heavy blast doors slid open with a pneumatic hiss, and 3 figures in combat armor stepped inside. Their gear was military grade, not the civilian security equipment common on trading stations. Weapons were holstered but visible, and their movements had the coordinated precision of a professional unit. The lead figure was humanoid but clearly not human. Taller, with elongated limbs and skin that had a metallic sheen. Andromedans, Marcus realized. He'd fought alongside them during the Outer Ring campaigns. Good soldiers, but they had a reputation for being inflexible in their tactics. "Marcus Chen," the lead Andromedan called out, his voice carrying the artificial harmonics common to his species. "You are to come with us." The cantina, which had just begun to return to normal conversation levels, went silent again. Marcus didn't move from where he stood, but Vexitar noticed that the human's posture had subtly shifted. Where before he had seemed relaxed, now there was a tension in his stance that suggested coiled readiness. "Captain Zethvar," Marcus replied, recognizing the figure. "Been a while since the Rigel campaign. What brings Andromedan Special Forces to a backwater trading post?" "Official business," Zethvar replied curtly. "You need to come with us now." "I'm retired," Marcus said calmly. "Have been for 3 months. My discharge papers are filed with Terran Command and registered with the Galactic Council." "Your retirement status is conditional," Zethvar said. "New information has come to light regarding your service record." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, but he kept his expression neutral. Around him, the cantina patrons were beginning to edge away from what was clearly becoming a tense situation. "What kind of information?" Instead of answering, Zethvar gestured to one of his companions, who produced a holographic display unit. The device projected an image into the air above the cantina floor, a star map showing the Outer Rim territories. "The hegemony is mobilizing again," Zethvar announced. "Intelligence reports indicate they're planning another major offensive against the free systems." This news sent a ripple of concern through the assembled beings. The hegemony had been quiet for the past 5 years, but their previous campaigns had devastated entire sectors. They were a coalition of the galaxy's most aggressive species, united under the principle that strength gave the right to rule. "The Galactic Council has authorized the reformation of the Special Operations Command," Zethvar continued. "Your name is on the list of recalled personnel." "My name is on a lot of lists," Marcus replied. "That doesn't mean I'm available." "You don't understand," Zethvar said, his harmonics taking on an edge of impatience. "This isn't a request. The Council has voted to invoke Emergency Protocol 7. The effect of those words was immediate and dramatic. Emergency Protocol 7 was the galactic equivalent of martial law, used only when the survival of multiple species was at stake. It gave the Council broad authority to conscript resources, including retired military personnel. "Besides," Zethvar added, his tone becoming more conciliatory, "you're the only human with command experience against hegemony forces. The Council specifically requested you." Marcus looked around the cantina, noting how the various species were reacting to this news. The Vegans looked worried, which made sense given their peaceful nature. The ethereals were shimmering with rapid data processing, probably accessing historical records about previous hegemony campaigns. Even Vextar seemed concerned. "What's the current threat assessment?" Marcus asked. Zethvar manipulated the holographic display, showing fleet movements and intelligence reports. "Hegemony forces have been massing in the dark sector. Conservative estimates put their strength at over 2,000 capital ships, with support vessels numbering in the tens of thousands." One of the Centauri traders made a choking sound. 2,000? That's larger than most planetary defense fleets. "It gets worse," Zethvar continued. "Intelligence suggests they've been incorporating new species into their coalition. The Void Hunters have been confirmed as allies, and there are reports of contact with the Machine Collective." This news caused genuine fear throughout the cantina. The Void Hunters were a nomadic species that consumed entire star systems, stripping them of all usable resources before moving on. The Machine Collective was even worse. A post-biological civilization that viewed organic life as a resource to be processed and utilized. And you want me to do what, exactly? Marcus asked. Fight 2,000 ships with what, sharp sticks and harsh language? The Council is assembling a multi-species task force, Zethvar explained. Each member species is contributing their best units. The plan is to strike at key hegemony installations before they can launch their offensive. A preemptive strike, Marcus mused. That's not typically how the Council operates. Desperate times, Zethvar replied. The analysis shows that if the hegemony launches their planned offensive, the casualty estimates are, he paused, checking his data, unacceptable. Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing the information. Around him, the cantina patrons waited to see what the legendary human soldier would decide. Who's in command of this task force? Marcus finally asked. Admiral Kethmore of the Andromedan Fleet, Zethvar replied. But the tactical planning is being handled by a joint command structure. Each species has input on strategy. Joint command, Marcus repeated. That worked so well during the last crisis. The sarcasm in his voice was evident to everyone present. Joint command structures were notorious for being slow, indecisive, and prone to political maneuvering rather than effective military action. Nevertheless, Zethvar said firmly, the decision has been made. You're recalled to active duty as of this moment, and if I refuse, Zethvar's harmonics took on a dangerous edge. Protocol 7 doesn't allow for refusal. You can come with us voluntarily, or we can invoke conscription protocols. The threat was clear. But Marcus noticed something else. The Andromedan's two companions had shifted positions slightly, moving to block potential exits. They were prepared for resistance. Marcus looked at Vextar, who had been listening to the exchange with obvious interest. What do you think, warrior? Sound like something worth fighting for? Vextar considered the question seriously. The hegemony destroyed 3 Zelrathi colony worlds during their last campaign. My clan has sworn blood vengeance against them. And you? Marcus turned to the ethereals. What do your memory banks tell you about hegemony occupation? The lead ethereal's form darkened. Complete cultural suppression, forced labor, systematic elimination of individual thought. The hegemony does not conquer, it consumes. Marcus nodded, then looked at the Vegan merchants. Your people have the most to lose if the trade routes are disrupted. The hegemony doesn't believe in trade, one of them replied quietly. They believe in taking. So we're all in agreement, Marcus said, turning back to Zethvar. The hegemony needs to be stopped. Then you'll come with us? I'll consider it, Marcus replied. But first, I want to know more about this task force. Specifically, I want to know why you really need me. Zethvar exchanged glances with his companions. What do you mean? I mean, Marcus said patiently, that Andromedan Special Forces doesn't get sent to retrieve retired humans unless there's something specific you need that only I can provide. So what is it? After a moment's hesitation, Zethvar manipulated the holographic display again. This time it showed detailed schematics of what appeared to be a massive space station. The hegemony has constructed a new type of fortress, he explained. Our intelligence suggests it's the command center for their entire operation. Taking it out would cripple their ability to coordinate the offensive. And it's protected by defense systems that have proven impervious to conventional assault. We've lost 3 reconnaissance fleets trying to gather intelligence on its weaknesses. Marcus studied the schematics, noting the multiple layers of shields, weapon emplacements, and what appeared to be some kind of spatial distortion field around the entire structure. Let me guess, he said after a moment. You need someone who specializes in unconventional solutions. The Council's exact words, Zethvar confirmed, were that they needed someone who could find a way to defeat the undefeatable. Marcus looked around the cantina one more time. These beings, representing dozens of species from across the galaxy, were all looking at him with expressions ranging from hope to curiosity to outright awe. Well, he said finally, I suppose retirement was getting boring anyway. The mining vessel Dust Runner had seen better days, which was exactly what Marcus had hoped for when he selected it from the task force's collection of captured ships. Its hull was scarred from years of asteroid mining. Its engines were deliberately maintained at just below optimal efficiency, and its cargo holds were filled with exactly the kind of rare minerals that the hegemony needed for their manufacturing operations. More importantly, it looked like exactly the kind of ship that desperate refugees would use to flee advancing hegemony forces. Marcus stood on the bridge, watching as Hegemony Station Omega grew larger on the view screen. The massive fortress was even more imposing in person than it had appeared in the holographic briefings. Weapons emplacements dotted its surface like the spines of some massive space-dwelling predator, and the spatial distortion fields around it made the stars shimmer and dance in the background. "Incoming transmission," announced Zixara, an ethereal who had volunteered for the mission, despite her species' usual reluctance to engage in dangerous activities. Her translucent form flickered with the rapid data processing that allowed her to monitor dozens of communication frequencies simultaneously. "Put it through," Marcus ordered. The view screen shifted to show a hegemony officer, one of the Krillian subspecies that served as the Coalition's military backbone. His forearms moved in the gestures that his people used to display authority, and his voice carried the harmonics of command. "Unidentified vessel, you are approaching a restricted military zone. State your purpose." Marcus stepped forward, making sure his appearance was visible to the hegemony officer. He had deliberately chosen civilian clothes that looked worn and desperate, and had applied makeup to simulate the kind of stress and exhaustion that refugees would display. "This is Captain Chen of the independent mining vessel Dust Runner," he replied, adding just the right amount of fear to his voice. "We're carrying refugees from the Kepler mining colonies. Request permission to dock for humanitarian assistance." The Krillian officer's 4 eyes studied Marcus with the kind of predatory attention that his species was famous for. "The Kepler colonies were pacified 3 days ago. All mining operations in that sector are now under hegemony control." "We barely got out," Marcus said, allowing genuine emotion to creep into his voice. It wasn't difficult, given that the pacification of the Kepler colonies had resulted in the deaths of over 1 million civilians. "Our engines are damaged, life support is failing. We just need basic repairs and supplies." Behind him, the rest of the infiltration team played their assigned roles. Vextar sat at what appeared to be the engineering station, his natural armor scarred and dented to suggest recent combat. 2 Andromedan specialists posed as ship's officers, their usually pristine uniforms deliberately rumpled and stained. Even Zixara had modified her appearance, dimming her natural luminescence to suggest exhaustion and stress. "How many refugees are you carrying?" the Krillian officer demanded. 43, Marcus replied, which was technically true. The team members were refugees in a sense, and the number matched the ship's registered passenger capacity. The officer considered this for a moment. "You will submit to full cargo inspection and personnel screening. Any attempt to deviate from assigned approach vectors will result in immediate destruction." "Understood," Marcus said. "We're just grateful you're willing to help." The transmission ended, and the team began the tense process of following hegemony traffic control instructions. The station's docking bays were massive enough to accommodate ships 10 times the size of the Dust Runner, and as they approached, Marcus could see the constant stream of vessels bringing raw materials and supplies to feed the fortress's manufacturing capabilities. "Scanning protocols are more sophisticated than we anticipated," Zixara reported quietly. "They're using multi-spectrum analysis to detect concealed weapons and equipment." "Will our gear pass inspection?" asked Lieutenant Yethmore, one of the Andromedan specialists. "It should," Marcus replied. "Everything we're carrying is commercially available technology. The weapons are standard civilian self-defense equipment, the explosives are mining charges, and the electronics are basic maintenance tools." This had been one of the most challenging aspects of planning the mission. They couldn't bring military-grade equipment without triggering the station's security systems. So everything had to be dual-purpose items that would appear innocent to casual inspection. "Docking clamp engaged," announced Krixta, a Zelrathi engineer who was posing as the ship's maintenance chief. "Station security is requesting immediate access to all ship systems. Grant them read-only access to the passenger manifest and cargo logs," Marcus ordered. "Make sure the power distribution records show the kind of fluctuations you'd expect from damaged engines." As the team prepared for the next phase of the infiltration, Marcus reviewed the mission timeline in his mind. They had approximately 6 hours before the task force would be in position for the main assault. 6 hours to reach the central core, disable the station's primary defenses, and take control of the manufacturing facilities. 6 hours to steal a fortress. The airlock cycled open, and a squad of hegemony security personnel entered the ship. They were a mixed unit, typical of the Coalition's forces. 2 Krillians providing firepower, a Thanathan serving as a living weapons detector, and a Void Hunter whose sensor capabilities could detect life signs through solid matter. Standard refugee processing, announced the lead Krillian. All personnel will be cataloged and assigned temporary quarters pending integration into the workforce. Marcus nodded submissively, playing the role of a relieved civilian grateful for hegemony protection. Around him, his team members did the same, each one a master of their profession pretending to be desperate refugees. The inspection process was thorough but routine. The hegemony forces were looking for signs of military resistance, not a precision infiltration team. They confiscated obvious weapons but ignored the mining equipment that would later serve as explosives. They recorded biometric data, but didn't perform the kind of deep background checks that would reveal the team's true identities. Your vessel will remain in Docking Bay 7 pending completion of repairs, the Krillian officer informed Marcus. Refugee quarters are located in Section 15. You will report for work assignment processing at 0800 hours local time. Thank you, Marcus said, managing to sound genuinely grateful. We won't forget your kindness. As the hegemony security team departed, the infiltration team began the careful process of dispersing throughout the station. They had memorized detailed deck plans, identified key systems and choke points, and rehearsed their individual assignments dozens of times. But knowing the plan and executing it under real conditions were 2 entirely different things. Phase 1 complete. Zixara whispered into her concealed communicator. Beginning dispersal pattern Alpha. Marcus made his way through the station's corridors, noting the heavy security presence but also the obvious signs of strain on the infrastructure. The hegemony had built their fortress quickly, prioritizing defensive capabilities over long-term sustainability. Power conduits were overloaded, life support systems were running at maximum capacity, and the manufacturing facilities were operating around the clock. Perfect conditions for the kind of systematic failures he was planning to create. His first objective was the primary power distribution center, located 3 levels down from the docking bays. According to the stolen schematics, it was lightly guarded because it was considered a low-priority target. After all, who would want to sabotage a power grid when there were so many more obvious targets available? The answer, of course, was someone who understood that the most effective way to cripple a complex system was to attack its foundation rather than its obvious defenses. Marcus reached the power distribution center without incident, using his cover identity as a refugee with electrical engineering experience. The hegemony was always in need of technical personnel, and his story about volunteering to help with repairs was readily accepted by the overworked security staff. Inside the distribution center, massive conduits carried energy from the station's fusion reactors to every system throughout the fortress. The engineering was impressive, designed for efficiency and redundancy, but it was also vulnerable to the kind of precise manipulation that wouldn't trigger automatic safety systems. Marcus began his work, making subtle adjustments to power flow regulators, introducing minor fluctuations in the distribution network, and creating the kind of intermittent faults that would appear random but would accumulate into major system failures over the next several hours. By the time he finished, the station's power grid was a time bomb waiting to explode. It would continue functioning normally for now, but as demand increased and systems compensated for the artificial inefficiencies he had introduced, cascade failures would begin rippling throughout the entire facility. Phase 2 complete, he whispered into his communicator, moving to secondary objective. Throughout the station, his team members were carrying out similar acts of precision. The emergency lockdown had caught Marcus in the worst possible location. Halfway between the power distribution center and his next objective, trapped in a maintenance corridor as hegemony security forces swept through the station. Through his communicator, he could hear similar problems developing for the rest of his team. "Vextar here," came the Zelrathi's voice, barely audible over background noise. "Security patrol has me pinned in Section 12. They're using some kind of enhanced scanning equipment." "Yethmore reporting," added one of the Andromedan specialists. "Emergency bulkheads have sealed off my route to the communication hub. Finding alternate path." Marcus pressed himself against the wall as footsteps echoed through the corridor outside his hiding spot. The hegemony security response was more sophisticated than their intelligence had suggested. with coordinated sweeps and advanced detection equipment that could identify concealed technology. "Zixara," he whispered into his communicator. "What's your status?" "Reaching Central Core Access Point," came the ethereal's reply. "But security presence is heavy. I count at least 20 guards between here and the primary control center." Marcus checked his chronometer. They had less than 3 hours before the task force assault began, and the mission was already falling behind schedule. Worse, the systematic sabotage they had implemented was beginning to take effect, which meant the hegemony would soon realize they were dealing with more than just refugee processing issues. That's when the lights flickered. It was subtle at first, just a momentary dimming that could have been attributed to normal power fluctuations. But Marcus recognized it as the first sign that his modifications to the power grid were working. Within minutes, the cascade failures he had engineered would begin creating serious problems throughout the station. "All units, this is Marcus," he whispered into his communicator. "Change of plans. We're accelerating the timeline. Begin Phase 3 immediately." "Sir," came Lieutenant Yethmore's voice, "the security situation is about to become irrelevant." Marcus interrupted. "Trust me." The lights flickered again, longer this time, and Marcus heard the distinctive whine of overtaxed power conduits. Emergency lighting kicked in throughout the corridor, bathing everything in the red glow that indicated system stress. That's when Marcus heard it, the sound of running footsteps and urgent voices as hegemony personnel began responding to what they assumed were random equipment failures. "Engineering to security," came an announcement over the station's communication system. "We're showing power fluctuations in sections 7 through 15. Recommend immediate diagnostic sweep." "Security to engineering," came the reply. "All personnel are currently engaged in refugee containment procedures. Engineering teams will have to handle the situation independently." Marcus smiled. This was exactly what he had hoped for. A resource allocation crisis that would force the hegemony to choose between maintaining security and maintaining their infrastructure. "Vextar," he whispered into his communicator. "Now would be an excellent time for some of that Zelrathi strength." "Understood," came the warrior's reply. Through the station's structure, Marcus felt more than heard the distinctive vibration of Zelrathi combat in action. Vextar had apparently decided that subtlety was no longer required and was now using his natural armor and strength to break through whatever obstacles were blocking his path. The power fluctuations were getting worse, and Marcus could hear the growing urgency in the hegemony communications as engineering teams struggled to deal with multiple system failures occurring simultaneously across the station. "All sections report status," came an increasingly frustrated voice over the communication system. "We're showing cascade failures throughout the primary power grid. Section 7 showing structural stress warnings," came one reply. "Section 12 reporting communication array malfunctions," came another. "Section 15 experiencing life support irregularities," added a third. Marcus began moving through the corridors, taking advantage of the chaos to reach his next objective. Emergency teams were rushing past him without a second glance, too focused on their technical crises to pay attention to one refugee who seemed to know where he was going. "Marcus," came Zixara's voice through his communicator. "I'm at the Central Core Access Point. Security presence has been reduced to 6 guards, but the blast doors are sealed. Can you open them? Not without triggering additional security protocols." Marcus considered this problem as he made his way through increasingly chaotic corridors. The station's automated systems were designed to respond to security threats, but they were also programmed to prioritize operational efficiency. "Try this," he said. "Trigger a false emergency in the central core. Make it look like the power fluctuations are threatening the primary systems. That would require administrative access to—" Zixara paused. "Actually, that might work. The emergency protocols would override the security lockdown if the system detected a threat to core operations." The lights went out completely for several seconds before emergency power kicked in. This time, the fluctuation was followed by the distinctive sound of alarms blaring throughout the station. "All personnel, this is Station Commander Yexthul," came an announcement. "We are experiencing major system failures. All engineering teams report to emergency stations. Security teams maintain positions but be prepared to assist with evacuation procedures if necessary." Marcus reached his second objective, the manufacturing control center. The massive chamber housed the computer systems that coordinated the station's shipbuilding operations, and according to their intelligence, it was directly connected to the central core. The security presence here was minimal, with most guards having been reassigned to deal with the various crises developing throughout the station. Marcus used his cover identity to gain access, claiming that he was an electrical engineer who had been sent to assist with the power problems. Once inside, he began the delicate process of modifying the manufacturing protocols. Instead of building new ships for the hegemony fleet, the automated systems would now begin constructing components that could be used to disable the station's own defenses. Phase 3 complete, he reported. Beginning final approach. Zixara here, came the ethereal's voice. Blast doors are open. Emergency protocols have cleared the corridor. Moving to central core now, Vextar reporting, added the Zelrathi warrior. Structural modifications complete. Station integrity will fail on your signal. Yethmor and team, came the Andromedan's voice. Communication systems are compromised. Hegemony forces will not be able to coordinate defensive response. Marcus felt a surge of professional pride as he made his way toward the central core. Despite the complications and the accelerated timeline, his team had executed their assignments with the kind of precision that only came from years of experience working together, which was remarkable, considering they had only known each other for 3 days. The central core was a vast chamber at the heart of the station, filled with the massive computer systems that controlled every aspect of the fortress's operations. Defensive systems, life support, manufacturing, communications, everything ran through the interconnected networks that filled the chamber from floor to ceiling. Zixara was already there, her translucent form flickering with rapid data processing as she interfaced directly with the station's primary systems. Around her, the 6 remaining guards lay unconscious, victims of the ethereal's ability to disrupt biological neural networks. How long do you need? Marcus asked as he began setting up the portable equipment they had smuggled aboard the station. To take complete control? 20 minutes, Zixara replied. To disable the primary defenses? 5 minutes. Marcus checked his chronometer again. The task force assault would begin in 90 minutes. They were actually ahead of schedule. Do it, he ordered. As Zixara worked, Marcus activated his communicator and sent the predetermined signal to the task force. Operation Trojan Horse successful. Begin main assault in 60 minutes. The reply came immediately. Acknowledged. All units moving to assault positions. Throughout the station, the cascade failures Marcus had engineered were reaching critical levels. Power systems were failing, structural integrity was compromised, and communication networks were operating at minimal efficiency. What had been the galaxy's most powerful fortress was rapidly becoming a death trap for its own inhabitants. Primary defenses disabled, Zixara announced. Shield generators are offline. Weapon systems are inoperative. The station is defenseless. And the manufacturing facilities? Under our control. I can turn their own automated systems against any remaining hegemony forces. Through the station's structure, Marcus could feel the vibrations of mass evacuation as hegemony personnel fled the failing fortress. Emergency shuttles were launching constantly, carrying away the personnel who had made the station their base of operations. Marcus, came Vextar's voice through the communicator. I'm reading massive explosions throughout the hegemony fleet. It appears they're scuttling Townst. We're a bow.